The first scream didn't sound human. It tore through the cold Washington air at 5:41 a.m. High, sharp, and wrong. By the time the second scream echoed off the Capitol dome, the wind had shifted. The birds had fled. And every camera pointed at the building sensed something was unraveling. The East Plaza lights flickered. A door slammed somewhere inside the rotunda. And the shadows on the marble moved before the people did. A group of veterans. 12 of them, standing in a clean, silent line. Watched from the base of the steps. No signs. No slogans. No chants. Just presence. Heavy. Unmistakable. Combat boots on wet stone. Hands unloved. Eyes trained not on the crowd forming behind them, but on the Capitol entrance itself. As if waiting for something. Or someone. To emerge. You know this feeling. The air before a storm that isn't weather. One veteran, taller than the rest, stepped forward. Gray at the temples. Old scars across his knuckles. A stiffness in his left knee that no amount of years could hide. He didn't speak. Didn't gesture. Didn't even blink. He simply stared at the locked double doors of the Capitol as if he'd stood before other doors like these. In Fallujah. In Kandahar. In forgotten corners the government quietly folded into footnotes. A reporter on the edge of the plaza raised her mic. "Why are you here?" The man didn't answer. A beat. A breath held too long. A hush moving over the plaza like a sheet. Then. Clang. A metallic slam from deep inside the building. Not a normal door. Too thick. Too reinforced. Every veteran's posture shifted at the same time. A subtle tilt. A readiness. Muscle memory from another lifetime. A Capitol police officer hurried down the steps, tension in his shoulders. Everyone needs to clear back. Now. The officer's voice cracked on the last word. That's when the tall veteran finally spoke, low and even. Too late for that. The officer hesitated. You can't be here. We were asked to be here. By who? Silence. But it wasn't denial. It was calculation. A pause shaped like a warning. The veterans exchanged a glance. Barely a glance. A flicker. Enough. A siren wailed 3 blocks away. Not urgent. Not rushed. Almost, stalled. Like someone wanted noise without response. A jogger passing by slowed, confusion turning to unease. What's going on? He asked the crowd. No one answered. Even the air didn't move. Then, a sound. Soft. Deliberate. A mechanical click. The east gate, the one never locked this early, sealed itself with a hydraulic hiss. The officer spun toward it. What the, who authorized? But another click followed. Then another. Gate after gate sealing. Locks engaging. Barriers shifting. Not to keep people out. To keep something in. The tall veteran exhaled. There it is. The reporter stepped closer, fear trembling her voice. What are they locking down? He looked at her, and for a moment his eyes softened. Not with pity. With recognition. You're asking the wrong question. She swallowed. What's the right one? He nodded toward the Capitol doors. What happens when they open? A hush rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered. This wasn't on the schedule. Someone else whispered. Nothing's supposed to happen today. But that was the problem. Things that aren't supposed to happen are always the ones that change everything. A third scream echoed inside the rotunda. Longer. Closer. More human this time. Which somehow made it worse. The veterans tightened formation. The officer radioed for backup. Static replied. Only static. A murmur spread through the watchers on the plaza. Concern. Fear. Recognition of something spiraling beyond protocol or politics. The tall veteran rolled his shoulders, a habit from years of gear he no longer carried. He said it quietly. Almost to himself. They should have listened. Someone in the crowd asked. Listen to who? He didn't answer. Because the truth. The real truth. Wasn't out here. It was behind those doors. Growing. Shifting. Waiting. A hinge groaned. A lock disengaged. A sliver of darkness split open between the Capitol doors. The reporter gasped. The officer drew back. Every veteran braced. You feel it too. That sudden gravity in your chest. When a moment stops being merely strange. And becomes dangerous. A shape moved behind the doors. Slow. Uneven. Wrong. But the real story hadn't even started. The doors didn't open all the way. Just a crack. Enough to release a draft of cold, recycled air. And something else underneath it. Not smoke. Not gas. Memory. The kind of smell you only recognize if you've been close enough to danger. To feel it stain your lungs. The tall veteran inhaled once. Slow. Measured. Then he whispered, barely audible. Not again. A tremor passed through the formation of veterans. Not fear. Recognition. It's the way soldiers look at each other. When a moment repeats itself. Years after they swore it never would. You've seen this scene before. Even if you haven't lived it. A diner TV playing late-night news. A highway billboard flashing emergency alerts. A family room going silent during a breaking broadcast. American memory is stitched from moments like this. The reporter stepped closer, mic trembling. Who are you people? The tall veteran didn't answer her at first. He kept his eyes fixed on the thin crack in the Capitol door. As if waiting for the building to exhale again. Then he spoke. We're called the Line. Another veteran added. It wasn't our idea. The reporter frowned. The Line. Is that a group? The tall veteran nodded once. Not a group. A consequence. His voice carried a heaviness. That made the crowd lean in without realizing it. After the wars ended, he said. They needed something new. New? The reporter asked. Control, another veteran muttered. The tall one ignored that. He looked past the plaza for a moment. Past the confusion, the tourists, the police. Toward something personal, buried. When he spoke again. His tone softened, becoming almost human. It started with him, he said. Him, who? The reporter asked. He didn't say a name. Instead, he gave a story. Because names can be denied. Stories can't. You ever heard of a place called County Road 19? His voice lowered as he spoke. It's a stretch of highway out near Raven Falls. 2 diners. 1 gas station. Nothing else but a radio tower and a field big enough to forget things in. You've seen towns like it. American silence. American emptiness. American truth. That's where he grew up, the veteran said. Small house. Old truck. Bad winters. He used to shovel snow for neighbors just to keep the lights on. A beat. And he hated the silence. Hated how loud it felt inside his own head. The reporter leaned in, mesmerized. What was he like? The veteran hesitated, his expression tightening. He had a contradiction, he said. A brain built for peace. And a life built for everything but. Another veteran chimed in softly. He used to watch late-night TV just to hear voices. Said it made the world feel less empty. The tall veteran nodded. He joined the military right after high school. Not for patriotism. Not for adventure. He just wanted noise. The reporter scribbled notes, her heart beat loud enough to feel in her throat. What happened to him, she asked. The veteran's jaw tightened. What happens to all the ones who come back, he said. They give you parades. Then they give you pills. A silence settled over the plaza. A quiet, heavy truth that no one needed explained. He didn't want medication, the tall veteran continued. He wanted purpose. And did he find it? The reporter asked. A pause. A flicker of something sharp behind the man's eyes. Oh, he found something, he said. But purpose wasn't what they offered him. The Capitol door creaked again. A deeper groan. Metal shifting. Bolts disengaging. The crowd jumped. Veteran stiffened. The officer's hand hovered near his holster. But the door didn't open wider. Not yet. It was teasing them. Or warning them. The tall veteran continued, voice lower now. The agency approached him first. Said they needed volunteers for a new reintegration program. Told him he could serve the country without leaving home again. A humorless smile ghosted across his face. He believed them. The reporter blinked. What kind of program? A monitoring initiative, he said. Small. Experimental. Tracking stress patterns in returning soldiers. Helping predict potential crises. That sounds useful. The veteran shook his head. It was useful. But not in the way they told him. He exhaled hard, as if each memory carried a weight. At first, it was simple. Wear a sensor. Answer weekly surveys. Check in with a counselor. A pause. Then they asked him to report on other veterans. The reporter's grip tightened on her mic. Report on, what? Instability, he said. Anger. Isolation. Paranoia. Like whistleblowing? No, the veteran's voice hardened. Like surveillance. The crowd murmured. A few people stepped back. Others stepped closer. American instincts. Distance or curiosity. He continued. They called the program the line. Not because he was guarding something. But because he was crossing it. A beat. He warned them he wasn't comfortable with it. Told them it felt wrong. Told them veterans needed help, not monitoring. Another veteran added quietly. That's when the test started. The reporter swallowed. Tests. Stress exposure, the tall veteran said. Sleep disruption. Simulated emergencies. Conditioning. You mean, experiments? No, he said. Experiments end. His eyes flicked to the Capitol door. This didn't. A gust of cold air hissed from the crack, carrying a faint metallic tang. Something shifted inside the building. Slow. Dragging. Heavier than footsteps. A murmur rippled across the crowd. What is that? The reporter whispered. The tall veteran didn't answer. He kept telling the story. But now he was speaking faster. Like time was running out. He didn't know what they were turning him into. None of us did. The reporter looked up sharply. Us? The tall veteran finally met her eyes. We were part of the program too. A wave of dread washed through the plaza. You all served together? She asked. No, he said. We didn't even know each other. Then how? They matched us by patterns, he said. Not by service. Not by branch. By fracture points. You felt that sentence. Deep. Personal. They didn't look for heroes, he said. They looked for the ones living closest to the edge. A hush fell. The early morning light shifted, turning the marble a cold blue. The reporter's voice shook. And him, the one who started it, where is he now? The tall veteran hesitated. His jaw clenched. His hand curled into a fist. He figured out what the program was really for, he said. And when he tried to expose it. The veteran's voice trailed off. Everyone leaned in. What happened? The reporter pressed. He looked back at the cracked door. A shadow moved behind it. Slow. Deliberate. He disappeared, the veteran said. The reporter stepped back. Disappeared? As in. But she didn't finish the question. Because something inside the Capitol whispered. Soft, mechanical, almost alive. And the tall veteran said only one thing. He's in there. A breath. A chill. A silence before the surge. But the real story, he added, hadn't even reached the surface. The moment he said it. He's in there. The entire plaza changed temperature. Not literally. Emotionally. It was the kind of shift you feel behind your sternum. That quiet drop from steady ground into something bottomless. The tall veteran's words hung in the cold morning air like frost. No one moved. Not the tourists. Not the police. Not even the reporters whispering into hot mics. You know this silence. Highway silence after a near crash. Hospital silence before the doctor speaks. American silence, heavy, waiting, inevitable. A young Capitol officer, barely out of academy training, stepped forward. His voice cracked. Sir, who exactly is he? The tall veteran didn't turn. He kept his eyes locked on the door. That thin, widening seam of darkness. Finally, he spoke. The first one they trained. The first one they broke. The first one they tried to reshape. A beat. The one who escaped the program. Before they decided no one else could. The officer blinked, overwhelmed. Escaped, he repeated. The tall veteran nodded once. They called him a success. He called it a prison. Another veteran beside him added quietly. He kept telling them. If you make people unbreakable, don't be surprised when they break your rules instead. The wind dragged across the plaza, carrying the faintest sound. A dull, rhythmic thud from inside the Capitol. Too heavy to be footsteps. Too uneven to be machinery. Too intentional to ignore. The reporter tightened her grip on the mic. What's happening in there? Something the public was never supposed to witness. The tall veteran said. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Fear, fascination, denial. You felt that mix before. Late night news. Flashes of chaos. The sense that something big is happening. Just beyond the frame. The veteran's tone shifted, growing sharper. You think the line was about monitoring veterans? The reporter blinked. I mean, wasn't it? That's what they told Congress, he said. That's what they told the media. He glanced at the Capitol, the tension in his shoulders unmistakable. But inside the program, things changed. The reporter frowned. Changed how? At first, they gathered data. Then they started predicting behavior. Then they started steering it. You mean psychologically? No, he said. Operationally. A veteran behind him nodded grimly. They didn't want stability. They wanted responsiveness. What does that mean? She asked. It means, the tall veteran said. They wanted to see how far they could push a human being. Before the human pushed back. A heavy clang echoed through the building. The veterans turned their heads in unison, their bodies snapping into old instincts. The crowd stepped backward. Even the officer, who'd been trying to look authoritative, took one reflexive step away from the door. "What is that?" he whispered. The tall veteran answered without hesitation. "Containment." The reporter's eyes widened. "They're trying to contain him." "Not him," the veteran said. "What they turned him into." The reporter shook her head, confused. "So he became violent?" The veteran's lips pressed into a thin line. "No. He became aware. A ripple of dread. A whisper of something bigger." The veteran continued. "When he realized the program was manipulating him, he shut down his trackers. Stopped responding to directives. Stopped participating in simulations. So they removed him from the program?" "No." The veteran shook his head slowly. "They repurposed him." The reporter's voice trembled. "For what?" The veteran looked at the door, jaw clenched. "For something they called civil vector override." A silence dropped over the plaza. A long, heavy, suffocating silence. "What does that mean?" the reporter asked, barely above a whisper. "It means," he said, "they wanted someone who could intervene before a crisis ever reached the public eye. A human failsafe. A pressure valve. A weapon without a weapon. A beat. But when you treat a person like a tool long enough, they stop caring who's holding the handle." Another thud. "Closer now. Heavier." The reporter jumped. "Why here? Why today? What's he trying to do?" The tall veteran inhaled. Deep, slow, steadying himself against old memories resurfacing. "He sent us a message," he said. 3 days ago." The officer turned sharply. "What kind of message?" "A warning," one of the veterans said. 8 words. No signature. The tall veteran recited it from memory. "Meet me at the Capitol." They finally crossed it. The reporter swallowed. "Crossed what?" The veteran stared at her. "The line. You felt that one. That cold shiver trailing down the spine of recognition." The reporter pressed on. "Why would he come here? What was the trigger?" The tall veteran sighed. "They activated a new directive." "A directive for him?" "No," he said. "For us." The plaza went still. The officer stared at him. "What directive?" The veteran's eyes hardened. "They told us to come to the Capitol. To secure the building perimeter. To prevent civilian entry. To hold position until further orders." "That sounds standard," the officer said weakly. The veteran shook his head slowly. "It would be standard if an agency existed to give us the order." The reporter froze. "You're saying there is no active chain of command," he said. "Not for us. Not anymore." A beat. "So the directive," she whispered, "came from nowhere." A gust of wind cut through the plaza at that exact moment. As if the world itself reacted to the truth. One of the veterans stepped forward. Someone used dead channels. Old codes. Obsolete frequencies that shouldn't work. Another added. Someone wanted us in the open. Visible. Predictable. The tall veteran nodded grimly. And he knew it. The officer swallowed hard. "So what does he want?" "He wants to stop whatever they triggered." The tall veteran said. "But he also knows something else." The reporter leaned closer. "Knows what?" The tall veteran's voice went low, dark, certain. "That the moment he steps through those doors, every system in this city will classify him as the threat they created." A shiver passed through the crowd. "So he's trapped?" the reporter asked. No, the veteran said. He's calculating. Another heavy blow struck the inside of the Capitol door. Metal on metal. Echoing across the plaza like a verdict. The officer stepped back again. Why isn't anyone responding? He demanded. Why aren't reinforcements here? The tall veteran didn't blink. Because he disabled the comm grid. The officer's face drained of color. He what? He didn't want anyone stopping us. The veteran said. And he didn't want anyone stopping him. But why involve you? The reporter asked. The tall veteran's jaw tightened. Because he remembers. Because he knows we're the only ones who understand what the program really created. A beat. And because he knows we're the only ones who might still reach him. Another clang. This one sharper, like a bolt snapping. The door shuddered. The veterans braced. The crowd gasped. The officer whispered. Oh God, he's coming out. The tall veteran didn't move. He will, he said. But not yet. Why not? The reporter asked. He looked at her with an expression carved from warning. Because before he steps through that door, we're supposed to make a decision. A decision about what? The tall veteran exhaled. Long, steady, as if preparing himself for something inevitable. Whether we'll follow the directive. Or break it. The reporter froze. What directive? His eyes darkened. The one that ordered us to stop him. A final metallic crack split through the plaza. The doors trembled. Something on the other side inhaled. And the tall veteran whispered. But the real danger wasn't him. It was who controlled the definition of normal. Most people never notice the moment their life quietly changes direction. There's no dramatic soundtrack, no spotlight, no applause. Just a tiny shift. A conversation, a disappointment, a realization. That cracks the old world open. For Michael, that moment arrived on a Wednesday night, in the silence after failure. He sat alone in the workshop behind his small apartment. A single bulb flickered overhead, dust floating in the air like suspended time. On the workbench, the failed prototype. A device meant to simplify people's lives. Now nothing more than a heap of burnt circuits and melted ambition. He stared at it for a long time. Not with anger. Not with panic. But with a strange, unfamiliar calm. As if the universe was waiting for him to listen. Then something happened. A thought. Sharp. Clear. Uninvited. If this is the bottom, then the next step can only be up. A micro break. A tiny, almost invisible pattern shift. But it was enough. He picked up the damaged device. Turned it over in his hands. And whispered a sentence he hadn't dared to say in years. This failure is not the end. It's the beginning of something I haven't understood yet. The bulb above him brightened for a moment. As if agreeing. Outside, the world kept moving, cars passing, neon signs blinking, people rushing to destinations they would forget tomorrow. But inside that small workshop, a man who once believed he was ordinary was beginning to question the limits he had accepted. Something had awakened. A spark, not electrical, not mechanical, but internal. And in the arc of his story, this was the first sign. That destiny had quietly entered the room. But sparks don't start fires on their own. They need fuel. And fuel often comes from the very places we try hardest to avoid. For Michael, that fuel was doubt. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that shouts. You're not good enough. No. His was quieter. More treacherous. It lived underneath everything. Like a faint hum you only notice when the room finally falls silent. And on that night, alone in the workshop, he heard it clearly. A memory resurfaced. Not dramatic. Not violent. Just painfully ordinary. A moment from years ago. His college advisor, looking at one of Michael's early designs. A forced smile. A slow exhale. Then the words that branded themselves into the back of his mind. You're talented, just not exceptional. A sentence meant to sound supportive. But to a young creator, it felt like a ceiling being lowered onto his dreams. He had carried that weight for years. Never mentioning it. Never fighting it. Just adjusting his posture to fit beneath it. Tonight, though, something was different. The failure in front of him hadn't crushed him. It had exposed the invisible prison he'd been living in. And the doubt, the same doubt that once held him back, was now turning into a question. What if they were wrong about you? The question lingered, echoing in the small workshop. It didn't bring comfort. But it brought something far more powerful. Possibility. Michael sat up straighter. He felt it. The subtle shift in gravity. As if the story of his life had slowly rotated. And a new path had come into view. The doubt was still there. But for the first time, he wasn't shrinking beneath it. He was staring back. Some stories begin with certainty. Michael's began with a fracture. A crack deep enough for the light to finally enter. Change rarely happens in isolation. Life has a way of sending the right people. Or the right challenges. Exactly when we're least prepared for them. For Michael, that arrival came in the form of a knock. A single, deliberate knock. On the workshop door. At 1:17 a.m. He froze. Nobody visited him this late. Nobody even knew he worked here at night. He hesitated, glancing at the broken prototype on the table. Then the knock came again. Slower this time. But heavier. Like someone who wasn't impatient. Just certain. Michael opened the door. A man stood in the cold. Dressed in a long, charcoal gray coat. Tall. Composed. Eyes sharp enough to dissect the room with a single glance. He wasn't a cop. Wasn't a neighbor. Wasn't someone Michael recognized from any chapter of his life. Yet somehow, he didn't look like a stranger either. The man tilted his head slightly. As if confirming something he already suspected. You're Michael Hale, he said. Not asked, stated. Michael nodded, unsure. The man reached into his coat. Not abruptly. Not ominously. Just with the ease of someone retrieving a document. He pulled out a slim black folder. And handed it to Michael. You built something tonight, he said. Something that shouldn't have worked. But almost did. Michael's breath caught. How could this man possibly know? Before he could ask. The stranger continued. We've been watching your progress for months. And we think you're ready to see what comes next. A pause. Not threatening. Not rushed. Inevitable. Michael opened the black folder. And what he saw inside made his heart thud so hard. He could feel it in his fingertips. Schematics. Designs. Systems he had never created. But somehow recognized. It was as if someone had taken the fragments of ideas he'd buried in notebooks and abandoned sketches. And developed them years beyond what he believed possible. At the bottom of the folder was a card. The Ascension Project. Michael looked up. But the man was already stepping back into the night. If you want answers, the stranger said. Come to the address on the last page. Tomorrow. 7 p.m. Then he disappeared into the darkness. Leaving Michael alone in the glow of the workshop light. Holding designs that defied everything he thought he knew. This was no longer a personal journey. No longer a private struggle. Something larger had entered his world. And whether he was ready or not, the story had just expanded. Michael didn't sleep. Not even for a minute. The folder sat on his cluttered workbench, its black cover reflecting the dim workshop light. Like an unopened confession. Every time he walked past it, he felt it tug at him. A gravity he couldn't ignore. By late afternoon, the decision was already made. Some decisions are like that. You choose. But truthfully, you were never going to do anything else. You know this feeling. You felt it before. As the clock crept toward 7, Michael buttoned the only clean shirt he owned, stepped into the cold evening air, and drove toward the address printed on the last page of the folder. 1913, East Shaw Street. Washington, D.C. A place that shouldn't have meant anything, yet felt unnervingly familiar. The building was older than the street around it. Red brick. 5 floors. Windows darkened. A federal style. But without any signage. The kind of place people walked past, without ever wondering what happened inside. Michael hesitated at the entrance. No guards. No cameras. Just a rusted metal door. And a faint humming sound behind the walls. He pushed the door open. The lobby was empty. Too empty. No furniture. No reception desk. Just bare concrete. And a single elevator. With its light already on. As if waiting for him. He stepped inside. The elevator didn't ask for a floor. It moved on its own. Downward. The deeper it descended, the colder the air became. A slow chill that wrapped around his spine. Like a warning he could feel but not decipher. When the doors slid open, Michael found himself standing in a basement hallway, lit by flickering fluorescent lights. At the far end of the corridor stood the man from last night. Still composed. Still silent. Still certain. "Follow me," he said. His voice calm enough to feel rehearsed. Michael obeyed. They walked past doors that looked thick enough to withstand an earthquake. Each marked only with numbers. 02, 03, 04, 07. Never in sequence. The man stopped at the last door in the hall. Number 11. A metal panel. No handle. He pressed his hand against a black square. And the door slid open. With a sound that was neither mechanical nor electronic. Something in between. Michael stepped inside. And froze. It wasn't a room. It was a command center. Circular. Dim. Silent. Screens curved around the perimeter. Each showing live feeds. Of places Michael recognized instantly. The National Mall. The Lincoln Memorial. The Capitol. The Pentagon Metro Station. An empty Veterans Hall in Virginia. With chairs in rows. And American flags lit by a single overhead bulb. He swallowed hard. "What is this?" he whispered. The man didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, he tapped one screen. Zooming in on a street outside the Capitol. A slow wave of realization hit Michael. Not fear. Not awe. Recognition. As if some part of him had always known. This world existed beneath the one he lived in. This, the man finally said, is the information they don't archive. The movements they don't broadcast. The stories they don't let surface. A beat. A breath. A truth being lifted like a veil. The veterans are organizing again. The words hung in the air. Heavy enough to bend it. Michael's chest tightened. He didn't know what that meant. Not yet. But he could feel it. His invention. His past. His questions. All of it was converging toward something he could neither control nor escape. The man turned to him. "Before we tell you what's coming," he said softly, "you need to understand your role in it." Michael's pulse quickened. "What role?" he asked. The man didn't blink. "The one you started writing. The night you were discharged." A cold silence filled the room. And then, that cinematic drop. When everything you thought you understood suddenly tilts. Because Michael had never told anyone about the letter he wrote the night he left the service. Not one person. Yet this stranger knew. "And here," the man said, placing a second folder on the table, "is the part almost no one saw." The room dimmed slightly. Screens flickered. Something shifted. Michael opened the folder. And whatever he found inside, it changed everything. But the real story hadn't even started. Michael stared at the folder, as if it might burn him. The air in the command center felt heavier now. Thicker. As though the room itself understood the weight of what came next. His fingers trembled when he cracked the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Yellowed at the edges. Folded twice. Creased from years of being held. Opened. Reopened. Studied. Stored. And never thrown away. Michael recognized it instantly. His breath caught. It was the letter. The one he wrote. On his final night in uniform. A night he'd never spoken about. Not to friends. Not to family. Not even to himself. In the years that followed. A night that had drifted so far into memory that sometimes he wondered if it had ever happened at all. But seeing the letter again brought everything back. Every noise. Every shadow. Every unfinished sentence. The stranger watched him with an expression Michael couldn't read. Part sympathy. Part curiosity. Part calculation. "You remember it?" the man said quietly. Michael couldn't speak. He nodded. "Read it," the man instructed. Out loud. Michael didn't want to. Not here. Not in this underground room. With its glow of surveillance screens. And its ghosts he hadn't invited. But something inside him knew. This moment had been waiting for years. He unfolded the letter. The handwriting was shaky. His younger self. Some version of him. Caught between anger and sorrow. He began to read. "To whoever finds this. Or to no one at all. Tonight is my last night in the service. Not because I wanted it. Not because I earned it. But because they decided my usefulness ended. The moment I started asking questions." Michael paused, throat tightening. He remembered writing those words. In a dim barracks room. That smelled of dust and cold air. He continued. "I watched men break open. Under the weight of things we were never supposed to carry. And every time I asked for answers, they said, 'That's not your concern, Hale.' You've heard this kind of line before. You can feel the sting in it. If there's one thing I regret, it's this. I let them convince me. That silence was loyalty." A long breath. A long silence. Michael almost stopped reading. But the man gave a slight nod. "Keep going. But tomorrow, when I step outside these gates, I won't be silent anymore. Someone has to rebuild what they've quietly broken." He looked up. The man's face didn't move. I don't know how. I don't know who will listen. But I know this. Something is coming. Something we've avoided too long. And when it arrives, I intend to be ready. Michael folded the paper again. With slow, careful hands. His eyes burned. Not with sadness. With recognition. With clarity. With a truth he could no longer outrun. The man stepped closer. That letter, he said, never reached its destination. It was intercepted. A beat. Not by us. The room seemed to shift. As if the walls themselves leaned in. To listen. Michael swallowed. Then who? The stranger didn't answer immediately. He walked to one of the curved screens. Tapped it lightly. And pulled up a new set of images. A dimly lit hangar. A chalkboard covered in maps. Stacks of identical black folders. A symbol painted on a concrete floor. Sharp, angular, unmistakably military. A group of veterans. Standing in a rough circle. Faces shadowed. Hands clenched. Like men preparing for something. They weren't allowed to admit existed. The man turned back to Michael. Your letter didn't disappear, he said softly. It sparked something. Michael's heart pounded. What did it spark? The man stepped forward. Close enough that Michael could see. The faintest trace of a scar. Running just below his jawline. A movement, he answered. One that's been growing in the dark. For more than a decade. Another pause. Another breath. And now. They want you back. Michael felt the floor tilt beneath him. The veteran halls. The surveillance feeds. The classified schematics. The stranger's midnight visit. All of it suddenly made sense. In a way that terrified him. The man pointed to the screen. Showing the capital. Something is coming, he said. The same thing you warned about. 12 years ago. The lights dimmed again. The air tightened. And when it breaks open, you will be the one. At the center of it. Michael's pulse hammered in his ears. A long moment stretched between them. Then the man delivered the line. That would haunt Michael. For the rest of his life. They didn't choose you. You chose this. The night you wrote that letter. The screen flickered. A siren sounded softly somewhere deep in the facility. Motion alerts. Movement near the capital. Michael stared at the images. Realizing this wasn't a reveal. This was a summons. And the story. The real one. Was only beginning to rise. The siren wasn't loud. That's what made it worse. A soft, pulsing tone. Barely above a whisper. Echoing through the underground hallways. Like a warning meant only for those who already understood it. The stranger's eyes narrowed. Not fear. Not confusion. Recognition. He tapped the nearest console. A series of feeds snapped into motion. Grainy images. Long-range thermal views. Crowd density maps. Drawn in shifting red clusters. Michael moved closer. At first, the screens looked ordinary. Just streets. Just people. Just the routine heartbeat of DC. But then he saw it. One cluster. One precise grouping of bodies. Was not moving like the others. It wasn't dispersing. It wasn't flowing. It was forming. Right outside the capital's east entrance. A slow pressure built in Michael's chest. What is that? He asked. The stranger didn't answer immediately. He enlarged the thermal feed. The cluster was tight. Unnaturally aligned. People shoulder to shoulder. Moving with intention. Not chaos. You've seen crowds like this. You know the difference. There's a moment when a group stops being a group. And becomes something else entirely. A force. The stranger finally spoke. That, he said, shouldn't be happening yet. Yet. The word hit harder than the alarm. Michael felt something colder than fear crawl up the back of his neck. Who are they? He asked. The stranger inhaled slowly. Veterans, he answered. But not the ones you marched with. These are the ones who read your letter. And took it further than you ever intended. Michael's pulse spiked. No, he whispered. That letter wasn't a call to arms. The stranger met his eyes. Michael. Every movement begins with something. Its creator never meant to ignite. A beat. A flicker. The screen sharpened. Faces emerged. Not clear. Not identifiable. But united. Their posture military. Their coordination unmistakable. They wore no uniforms. No patches. No declared allegiance. Just cold, deliberate purpose. Michael stepped back. Why are they there? He asked. What are they doing? The stranger clicked to another feed. This one from a traffic camera. Near the west lawn. A black van had stopped. Half on the curb. Doors wide open. Inside, barely visible through the grain, were crates. Unmarked. Stacked. Heavy. Michael felt his stomach drop. What's in those? He asked. The stranger gave him a look. That said he already knew the answer. But needed Michael to say it first. I don't know, Michael whispered. But the stranger shook his head. You designed the first prototype. You almost finished the second last night. You're the only one who can see the pattern. Michael stared again. Harder this time. And then the realization hit him. Like a blow to the ribs. The size of the crates. The spacing of the internal braces. The reinforced hinges. The shape. Not weapons. Not explosives. Signal amplifiers. His signal amplifiers. The ones he abandoned after the discharge. The ones he wrote about. Only in blurred, half-forgotten sketches. And that damn letter. They hadn't just read the letter. They had built off it. Replicated it. Weaponized it. His throat tightened. The stranger nodded once. As if confirming Michael's unspoken conclusion. You see it now, he said. This isn't a protest. It's a demonstration. And if those crates activate, the entire communication grid around the capital will ripple. Michael shook his head. That tech wasn't meant for disruption. But it can disrupt, the stranger replied. And that's all the wrong people need. The siren pulsed again. Softer. Slower. More insistent. The screen shifted automatically. To a new feed. A hidden camera angle. From a side gate near the Capitol. A man stepped into frame. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Walking with a limp. The kind that comes from years in service. His face was turned away. But Michael felt something jolt inside him. He knew that posture. That gait. That scar on the forearm. That uncompromising stillness. It was someone he never thought he would see again. Someone from his unit. The man Michael once trusted. More than anyone. The man who vanished. The same night Michael wrote the letter. The stranger's voice lowered to a quiet murmur. You understand now why we brought you here. Michael stared at the screen. Pulse thundering in his ears. The cluster tightened. The crates were moved. The van's engine roared to life. Something was beginning. Something scripted. Long before Michael understood his part in it. And this, the stranger said, watching the screens darken to red alert, is where your story turns. Michael exhaled shakily. Because the man on that screen, the one leading the formation, was the last person he wanted to see in that place. At that moment. And the real story still hadn't even started. The first sounds came quietly. Almost unnoticed. A shuffle. A click. The subtle hum of electronics awakening. Michael felt it before he heard it. A pressure wave crawling up his spine. A ripple that said, something inside the capital was no longer inert. The stranger didn't move. He merely pressed a finger against a console. And the feed zoomed in. Every angle, every corner, every shadow now alive with motion. The veterans were in motion. Not running. Not panicking. Walking with precision. As though a single, invisible hand was guiding them. You've seen groups like this before. Crowds of the disciplined. Marchers, soldiers, orchestrated protesters. But this was different. It had purpose. Michael swallowed hard. Why aren't they being stopped? He asked. His voice barely audible over the low hum. The stranger's expression hardened. They are being allowed. By systems no one outside this basement understands. A beat. Michael's pulse spiked. The hum grew louder. Then a sharp click. Metal doors unlocking across the Capitol complex. Automated. Pre-programmed. Coordinated. The first wave hit. Doors that should have resisted. Barriers meant to delay. Security protocols designed to alert. All bypassed. It was as if someone, or something, had rewritten the rules of the building. From the inside out. Michael leaned closer to the console. A feed showed movement in the West Hall. Uniformed guards were frozen, hesitant. Caught in a moment of indecision. Every second stretched like an eternity. And then came the sound. The low, echoing chant of the veterans. Their voices unifying, commanding. A rhythm that made the hairs on his arms rise. Michael knew that rhythm. He had heard it on late-night walks through training grounds. On cold mornings marching past empty barracks. Discipline. Purpose. Unyielding order. This isn't a protest, he whispered. This is a siege. The stranger's lips tightened. Call it what it is. It's a test. And you are part of it, whether you like it or not. A new screen flickered. Signal amplifiers. Crates moving. Wires snaking toward hidden receivers. The technology Michael thought abandoned was waking up. Not sleeping, not neutral. But active. A sudden, soft alarm sounded from the basement. Red lights pulsed along the floor. Michael realized. This wasn't just chaos outside. This was a system-wide event. And he was standing at the command center that controlled it. A veteran's face appeared on a live feed. The man who vanished years ago. Leading the cluster. Scanning the surroundings. Eyes sharp. Calculated. Michael swallowed again. Recognition collided with fear. What is he doing? The stranger stepped forward. Testing. Seeing how far he can go. Before the system pushes back. The hum increased. Lights flickered. An elevator bell rang somewhere above them. Unseen doors unlocked. Michael could feel the moral weight. Every choice mattered now. Every hesitation, every step, every thought was part of a chain reaction that could not be undone. The first wave had begun. The capital was no longer just stone and marble. It was a stage. A machine. A chessboard. And Michael had already been placed as a piece. A screen blinked red. Signal amplifiers powered up. Static hissed through the monitors. Phones in the plaza, live cameras, radio towers. Every electronic heartbeat in the city was responding. Michael's throat tightened. "They're going to notice," he said. "They already have," the stranger replied. "And the question isn't if someone responds. It's how fast." The first chaos wave was not just a movement outside the building. It was a pulse. A signal. A message. And the message was unmistakable. "This is the beginning." The hum in the basement shifted. Not louder. Different. A rhythm Michael could feel in his chest. Like the pulse of a living organism. Every screen flickered. The live feed synchronized into a single, continuous stream. The veterans outside, the ones following the rhythm, now had their signals amplified. Their presence no longer just physical. It was electronic. Tangible. Everywhere at once. Michael's stomach turned. "You mean, it's connected? The signal, the amplifiers, it's them?" The stranger didn't answer. He only nodded. Then tapped a console. A new feed appeared. A digital map of the capital area, streets, and transit lines. All lit with pulsing red nodes, like a living network of intent. "You see it now?" the stranger asked. Michael's eyes widened. Each red node corresponded to a veteran in the field. Each pulse matched a step, a movement, a breath. They were no longer just people. They were sensors. Operators. Coordinators of a single purpose. A beat. Michael leaned closer. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not with my tech. Not yet. I didn't. You didn't intend this, the stranger interrupted. But that doesn't matter anymore. Intentions are irrelevant. Once a system becomes aware of itself. Outside, faint echoes drifted through the thick walls. The low hum grew into a metallic resonance. Doors along the capital's east wing clicked open. Locks disengaged silently, almost ceremoniously. Michael could see it on the screen. One veteran moving through the corridor with precision. Leading others in formation. Their steps aligned like a metronome. The stranger's voice lowered, almost a whisper. "Notice the pattern. Every movement, every pause, every diversion, calculated. They are testing you. Testing the system. Testing us." Michael's pulse accelerated. Why? Why the tests? Why now? The stranger pressed a series of keys. The feed zoomed in on the black crates lined along a service corridor. Electrical panels glowed softly inside them, wires running like veins. And then Michael understood. The crates weren't just amplifiers. They weren't weapons. They were conduits. Signal extenders. A bridge between the human element and the city's digital skeleton. One of the veterans outside raised a hand. A microgestural signal. Almost invisible. But the amplifiers detected it instantly. Nodes blinked across the map. Lights on nearby screens pulsed. Traffic cameras adjusted angles automatically. Security feeds reoriented. The stranger exhaled slowly. "You see now. This is the crossing. From human intention to machine response. From individual will to collective force." Michael's hands shook. He could feel the moral weight pressing down. Every decision he made here, in this basement, would ripple through the city. Through systems, through lives, through history. In ways he wasn't prepared to calculate. Then a new sound cut through the hum. Voices over radios. Distant, crackling, fragmented. But intelligible. Clear enough to send a chill down his spine. They're moving. East gate compromised. Control lost on third floor. They've initiated the override. Michael froze. Override. That word, silent, precise, carried the weight of inevitability. Not just chaos. Not just rebellion. Systemic disruption. And it was already in motion. The stranger placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. Whatever you believed about control, forget it. Every movement, every pause, every diversion, calculated. They are testing you. Testing the system. Testing us. Michael's pulse accelerated. Why? Why the tests? Why now? The stranger pressed a series of keys. The feed zoomed in on the black crates lined along a service corridor. Electrical panels glowed softly inside them, wires running like veins. And then Michael understood. The crates weren't just amplifiers. They weren't weapons. They were conduits. Signal extenders. A bridge between the human element and the city's digital skeleton. One of the veterans outside raised a hand. A microgestural signal. Almost invisible. But the amplifiers detected it instantly. Nodes blinked across the map. Lights on nearby screens pulsed. Traffic cameras adjusted angles automatically. Security feeds reoriented. The stranger exhaled slowly. You see now. This is the crossing. From human intention to machine response. From individual will to collective force. Michael's hands shook. He could feel the moral weight pressing down. Every decision he made here, in this basement, would ripple through the city. Through systems, through lives, through history. In ways he wasn't prepared to calculate. Then a new sound cut through the hum. Voices over radios. Distant, crackling, fragmented. But intelligible. Clear enough to send a chill down his spine. They're moving. East gate compromised. Control lost on third floor. They've initiated the override. Michael froze. Override. That word, silent, precise, carried the weight of inevitability. Not just chaos. Not just rebellion. Systemic disruption. And it was already in motion. The stranger placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. Whatever you believed about control, forget it. Outside, the plaza lights flickered. People noticed, stopped, gasped. Traffic ground to a halt. Radios screeched with interference. No one understood what was happening. But everyone could feel it. On the screens, one veteran lifted his hand. A microgesture. A single instruction. Amplified. And the doors of the Capitol responded. They didn't just open. They welcomed the formation. Michael stepped back. He felt the ground shift beneath him, emotionally and physically. For the first time, he understood the paradox. The thing he had created to protect people was now enabling a controlled chaos that no one had anticipated. The stranger placed a hand on his shoulder. This isn't about politics. This isn't about protest. This is about systems. And systems obey the loudest, sharpest signals. A siren wailed softly from a distant tower. Phones in the plaza lit up, flashing alerts. Cameras adjusted. Traffic lights stuttered. Michael's mind raced. Every scenario he'd ever calculated was now obsolete. Every assumption shattered. Then the storm hit. Not metaphorically. Not slowly. But immediately. Screens flashed with movement. Red nodes expanding outward like wildfire. Veterans converged. Amplifiers pulsed. Doors locked behind them and unlocked ahead. Signals cascaded. Systems bent. The capital had become a living organism. And the veterans its neurons. Michael's tech its electrical impulses. He felt it in his chest. The human element. The technological element. Colliding, overlapping, inseparable. The stranger leaned close. You are part of it now. Whether you intervene or not. You are within the storm. Michael nodded, jaw tight, eyes wide. The hum reached a crescendo. Then, silence. Not peaceful, but anticipatory. The storm wasn't over. It had only begun. A screen lit up, showing the van by the west gate. Crates in perfect alignment. Signal wires stretching like veins. A veteran stepping forward. Then another. Then the leader, the man from his past. Michael exhaled sharply. Recognition hit. Fear hit. Responsibility hit. You felt this before, didn't you? The stranger whispered. Michael's mind screamed. I've never been ready for this. But the storm didn't wait. It surged. It demanded. It required. And in that moment, Michael realized. The battle wasn't outside the building. It wasn't even outside the city. It was inside him. Inside the system. Inside the fragile line where human intent meets unstoppable force. The storm had arrived. And nothing would ever be the same. Michael stood in the command center. Watching the capital's pulse flicker across the screens. Red nodes, live feeds, signal amplifiers. All moving in perfect, terrifying synchronicity. And then it hit him. He wasn't just observing anymore. He was part of it. Every decision, every hesitation, every glance. Was contributing to the unfolding storm. You know this feeling. When the world shifts. And you realize you've been carrying the wrong map. All along. Michael's hands shook as he reached for the keyboard. It wasn't instinct. It was inevitability. He had been trained to follow orders. To obey systems, to defer responsibility. But all that training meant nothing now. Because this system, his creation, his letter, the veterans, had already started rewriting the rules. He remembered the letter again. The words he had written in secrecy. The promise of action buried in quiet desperation. And he understood. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm inside. The first wave of chaos had illuminated something he had never confronted. His own complicity. He had thought failure was an end. He had thought isolation would protect him. He had thought silence was loyalty. But here, in this underground command center, he realized the truth. Silence and hesitation weren't protection. They were permission. Michael's eyes scanned the screens. The veteran's movements were precise, almost mechanical. Every gesture, every pause, every step amplified by his abandoned technology. And yet, they weren't machines. They were human. Fragile, driven, resolute. He felt their fear, their hope, their determination. Even through the screens. A low hum ran through the amplifiers. He recognized it now, not as a threat. But as a signal. A pulse meant to awaken. To connect. To provoke choice. The stranger watched him closely. You know what this is, he said softly. This is the moment you've been running toward your whole life. Without even knowing it. Michael's throat tightened. He wanted to argue. To deny. But the truth pressed through. This wasn't about control. It wasn't about the system. It was about understanding what it meant to act. Even when consequences are unknown. A siren pulsed somewhere distant. Lights flickered. Voices rose in the plaza outside. Michael felt a strange clarity amidst the chaos. He could no longer hide behind hesitation. The storm demanded him. His courage, his ingenuity, his conscience. He took a deep breath. Closed his eyes. And let himself feel the weight of every life intertwined with the unfolding events. Freedom, he realized, was never inherited. It was chosen. In moments like this, when the world tilts and chaos presses, freedom is practiced. Through action, through courage. Through the refusal to let fear decide for you. Michael opened his eyes. The storm outside was still rising. But inside, something had shifted. The fear remained, but so did resolve. The uncertainty remained, but so did clarity. The stranger nodded once. You see it now. The storm isn't just outside. It's in here. And it's waiting for you to respond. Michael's fingers hovered over the keyboard. The screens pulsed. The amplifiers hummed. And somewhere inside him, a mind that had once accepted limits, was finally learning to question everything. Because the storm had arrived. And it would not wait. The first shouts came softly, echoing from the plaza outside. Michael didn't need to look, he could feel it. The pulse of human will. Amplified through technology. Stretching across the city. The screens lit up. The veterans moved with methodical precision. Each micro-gesture, a hand raised, a step forward. Triggering cascades in the amplifiers. Signals jumped, lights flickered, doors clicked. Michael leaned closer. He could hear it through the faint speakers. Low murmurs, orders whispered. The cadence of intent. You felt this before, haven't you? The stranger's voice cut softly through the hum. Michael didn't answer. He was too busy processing, too busy connecting dots. Between the amplified human force and the capital's vulnerabilities. A feed from the east gate zoomed in. The van was positioned perfectly. Crates lined up. Signal cables snaking like veins. The veterans approached with precision. Their leader, Michael's former comrade, paused, scanning. Recognition. Shock. Confusion. Michael's stomach churned. The man on the screen had been like a brother once. Someone he trusted beyond measure. And now, he was orchestrating a movement. Built from Michael's abandoned technology. The stranger tapped a console. Watch carefully. This is your first confrontation. Not with them. With the reality you helped create. Outside, a door clicked. Then another. And the amplified signal triggered a cascade. Security cameras realigned. Barriers disengaged. The flow of the plaza bending to the rhythm of unseen hands. Michael's hands shook. What do I do? He asked. But the stranger didn't answer. He simply stepped back, letting the storm unfold. A microphone feed caught fragments of conversation. Hold position. Signal stable. Do not deviate. And then, the amplified hum shifted. It grew louder. Almost a chant now. Mechanical, yet unmistakably human. Michael realized the paradox. The more the system moved, the more human intention was reflected back. Every step, every gesture, amplified by technology, was now a test of moral choices. He felt the first pang of responsibility. Not fear. Not guilt. Responsibility. The man on the screen raised a hand. A signal. Amplifiers surged. Doors at the Capitol's east wing unlocked. Veterans entered. And Michael knew. Not everything they did would be right. Not every movement would be ethical. Not every consequence would be anticipated. The first confrontation had begun. Not with words. Not with fists. But with a collision of intention and power. Of past and present. Of human will and systemic amplification. Michael took a deep breath. He had crossed the threshold from observer to participant. And in that crossing, he realized a terrifying truth. The storm outside was only the beginning. The storm inside was far more dangerous. Screens flickered again. Signals pulsed. And for a brief, suspended moment, Michael understood that the true confrontation wasn't with them. It was with himself. Michael's hands hovered over the keyboard. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing into his bones. Every pulse from the amplifiers, every movement outside, was a reflection of a choice he hadn't made. Until now. The screens showed veterans moving in calculated precision. The leader, his old comrade, paused at a junction. A single gesture. And the signal would reroute power. To override the east wing doors. A simple command. Yet capable of altering the lives of everyone inside the capital. Michael swallowed hard. You know this feeling. That moment when intention meets consequence. And the line between right and wrong is no longer clear. The stranger's voice cut through the hum. Every movement you see, every action, was possible only because you didn't stop it earlier. Michael's mind raced. Years of training, discipline, obedience, all meaningless here. This wasn't about following orders. It was about choice. And every choice carried the weight of hundreds, maybe thousands. Even millions, of lives. A siren pulsed from a distant corner. Lights flickered. Voices in the plaza grew louder. Michael could see small clusters diverging. Some following the rhythm. Others hesitating, unsure. The stranger tapped a console, enlarging a feed. A veteran paused, looking at a civilian worker moving across a corridor. The hum shifted, almost as if the amplifiers were responding to the hesitation. Michael's chest tightened. One choice. One gesture. One hesitation. And someone could be hurt. You feel it, the stranger murmured. Right? The friction between what must happen and what should happen. Michael nodded slowly, understanding the paradox. He had created the tools for protection. He had written the letter to inspire action. And yet, the same tools, the same inspiration, were now amplifying chaos. A low vibration ran through the basement. Screens flickered. Doors at the Capitol shifted. And then a figure appeared. His former comrade, now standing at a doorway. With the amplified signal surging behind him. Michael froze. Recognition collided with moral conflict. He could stop it. He could override the signal. He could pull the veterans back, prevent harm. But every intervention carried risk. Every choice could escalate the storm. Every hesitation could cost more. The stranger's voice softened, almost a whisper. This is the point where you realize. Sometimes, being right isn't enough. Sometimes, being alive isn't enough. Sometimes, you must confront the consequences of your own creation. Michael took a deep breath. The hum pulsed through him. The amplified human will. And he realized something fundamental. The real battle wasn't outside. It wasn't against the veterans. Or the amplifiers. Or even the chaos itself. The battle was inside him. Inside the decisions he hadn't made. Inside the letter he had written. And the consequences it had set in motion. Outside, the storm continued to rise. Inside, Michael finally acted. Not fully confident. Not fully sure of the outcome. But resolved. Because hesitation was no longer an option. The first moral fracture had been crossed. And the story, the real story, was beginning to accelerate. The basement hummed louder. Not just from electronics, but from something that felt alive. A rhythm, almost organic, running through cables, amplifiers, and human movement outside. Michael stared at the screens. Clusters of veterans moved through corridors with unnerving precision. Every micro-gesture triggered a cascade. Doors unlocking, cameras swiveling, lights flickering. It was no longer just a formation. It was a living network. You've seen systems like this before. Machines responding to inputs. Yet this one had a pulse. That was unmistakably human. Every hesitation, every step, every breath was being amplified. Michael's fingers hovered over the keyboard. He realized, the network wasn't just reacting to commands. It was reading intent. Predicting action. Almost thinking. The stranger leaned closer. "See it?" he asked softly. "Your creation isn't passive. It adapts. It learns. It mirrors the will of those who feed it." Michael swallowed hard. Recognition collided with fear. His past decisions, his abandonment of the project. The letter he wrote, the silence he maintained. All had converged into this moment. A screen zoomed on the Capitol's east wing. A veteran paused, hand raised, signaling the group. The amplifiers pulsed in response. Doors shifted open with smooth inevitability. It was a ballet of intention and consequence, where one wrong move could ripple into chaos. Michael felt the weight pressing down. This was more than a protest. More than a system. This was human will amplified into force. A living, breathing entity. Stretching from the plaza into the city's infrastructure. The stranger's voice softened, almost a whisper. "You feel the responsibility now. Every signal, every choice, echoes far beyond this room. It touches lives you haven't even seen." Michael took a breath. The hum vibrated through him. His chest. His bones. Even his thoughts. A low alert flashed across a screen. Traffic cameras detected an unauthorized vehicle entering a restricted corridor. Signal amplifiers adjusted automatically. Veterans shifted, repositioned, realigned. Michael realized something terrifying. He was no longer the observer. He was part of the network. Every decision, every hesitation, every emotional reaction was feeding the system. A moment later, the leader appeared on a feed, scanning the Capitol's plaza. Michael recognized the posture, the gait, the determination. It was the same figure who had vanished years ago. His former comrade. The same man who had unknowingly drawn Michael into this storm. Michael's pulse quickened. This is beyond control," he whispered. The stranger shook his head. "No. It's not beyond control. Control has shifted. It's now a matter of understanding the flow. Anticipating the patterns. Influencing outcomes without forcing them." Michael's hands clenched. The network pulsed. Almost breathing. Almost conscious. It reflected intention. Amplified human will. And began reshaping reality itself. And in that moment, he realized the storm outside was nothing compared to the storm within. The collision of responsibility, morality, and amplified human force. The network was alive. And so was he. The first true wave of control, interwoven with chaos, had begun. The first clash was inevitable. Not planned. Not orchestrated. But unavoidable. Michael watched the screens as veterans converged near the west entrance. Signal amplifiers hummed, wires glowing faintly. Doors unlocked, barriers shifted. And the Capitol's infrastructure began bending to their will. A van idled at the curb, crates aligned like sentinels. Inside, the amplifiers pulsed rhythmically. Every micro-gesture from the veterans outside triggered reactions. Lights, cameras, sensors. A symphony of control. Michael's chest tightened. The network wasn't just reacting. It was anticipating. Learning. Predicting. You've never seen it this way, have you? The stranger's voice cut softly through the hum. Michael shook his head, swallowing hard. It's alive, he whispered. Yes, the stranger replied. Not in the sense you expected. But alive in intention. Alive in consequence. Alive in morality. Outside, the first real collision happened. Two veterans approached a security checkpoint. The amplified signal nudged the barriers open. Guards hesitated, unsure. The veterans paused, signaling each other. And then it happened. A guard tried to intervene. A hand reached for a control panel. Intending to override. The signal reacted instantly. Lights flickered, doors shifted. The guard froze mid-action. Technology, intention, and human will entwined. Creating a moment suspended in time. Michael's pulse pounded. He realized the terrifying truth. He wasn't controlling the system anymore. He was part of its moral calculus. The stranger leaned closer. This is the friction. Where right and wrong collide with power and consequence. Where hesitation and action carry equal weight. Another feed zoomed in. The leader, Michael's former comrade. Paused, eyes scanning, evaluating. His hand lifted. A micro-gesture that amplified the network. Doors unlocked further, corridors shifted. Systems bent seamlessly to human intent. Chaos and order intertwined. A pulse of energy. As if the building itself had become sentient. Michael's hands shook. He could intervene. Override the signal. Pull the veterans back. But every choice carried risk. Every hesitation carried risk. Every action carried consequences he could not predict. The first collision was more than physical. It was moral. Technological. Psychological. Every element of the storm now intertwined. The stranger's voice softened, almost reverent. You feel it, don't you? The weight of your own creation. Pressing on everything around you. And on yourself. Michael took a deep breath. He realized that the storm outside, the amplified human will. The veterans moving with precision. Was only a reflection of the storm inside. The hum rose to a crescendo. Lights flickered. Signals pulsed. Every heartbeat in the room synchronized with the amplified network outside. And Michael understood. The first collision had happened. And there would be many more. Because the storm was no longer outside. It was in him. And it was unstoppable. The screens flickered. Red nodes pulsed like hearts. The amplifiers hummed, not just electricity. But the echo of human will made tangible. Michael stood frozen. He could feel every pulse. Every amplified gesture. Every choice the veterans made. Resonating through the capital's veins. You felt this before. That moment when chaos isn't outside you. But inside. Pressing, twisting, demanding clarity. The stranger's voice broke through the hum. This is the eye of the storm. Everything converges here. Inside you, outside you. Everything you created. Meets everything you ignored. Michael's hands shook as he scanned the feeds. A veteran paused near a grand hallway. His hand lifted, a signal almost imperceptible. Yet the amplifiers reacted instantly. Doors shifted. Lights blinked. Cameras turned. A chill ran through Michael. His former comrade was leading them. His posture precise, calculated. Recognition collided with guilt. The man he trusted, the man he once called brother, was now part of a network he couldn't fully control. Outside, footsteps echoed through the corridors. Voices rose, commanded, coordinated, amplified. And Michael could feel it. Every choice he made, every hesitation, was feeding the storm. The stranger leaned close. You see it now. This isn't just technology. This isn't just protocol. This is human intention, amplified. And the storm doesn't distinguish between good and bad. Michael's pulse raced. He realized, the storm was testing him. Testing morality. Testing courage. Testing whether he could act. When the consequences were unbearable. A siren pulsed softly in the distance. Lights flickered across the Capitol's marble walls. The amplified signal surged again. The veterans moved with precision. A door clicked open. Another followed. Michael's chest tightened. The network wasn't just outside. It was inside. It mirrored his fear, his hesitation, his resolve. Every thought, every micro-expression was being read, reflected, and amplified. He swallowed hard, feeling the weight of years, of choices ignored. This wasn't a protest anymore. It wasn't a demonstration. It was a mirror. A storm showing him who he was. Who he had been. And who he could become. The stranger's voice softened. You can choose to lead it. Or let it lead you. But one thing is certain. You cannot remain passive. Michael exhaled slowly. The hum of the amplifiers resonated in his chest. The storm outside raged. The storm inside roared. And he understood, finally. The eye of the storm was not calm. It was a crucible. And he had entered it willingly, or unwillingly. It didn't matter anymore. The first true choice awaited. And the amplified human will beyond the screens was watching. The basement pulsed. Red lights from the amplifiers flickered against concrete walls. Michael's pulse matched the rhythm. Every node, every signal, every amplified gesture was a countdown he could feel in his chest. Outside, the veterans moved with relentless precision. No hesitation. No error. Every step choreographed by the amplified network. Every gesture triggering a ripple in the Capitol's infrastructure. Michael leaned over a console, watching feeds in rapid succession. The west corridor, doors disengaging, barriers folding. The east wing, a cluster of veterans coordinating silently. The central hall, his former comrade signaling. Every micro-movement amplified, mirrored, and propagated. You see it now, the stranger murmured. The tipping point isn't outside. It's inside you. Every decision, every hesitation, every instinct feeds the storm. And the storm doesn't wait. Michael's fingers hovered above the keyboard. He could override the signal. He could shut down the amplifiers. He could attempt to regain control. But every intervention carried consequences. Every choice could escalate the chaos. Every hesitation could cost lives. Outside, a door clicked open. A veteran moved forward, leading a line through the corridors. Amplified signals pulsed in response. Lights flickered. Cameras pivoted. Security systems staggered. Michael's chest tightened. You've gone too far, he whispered. But the network didn't care. Intentions were irrelevant. Only action mattered. The stranger leaned in, voice low. This is where the system tests you. Not for failure. Not for obedience. But for moral reckoning. And the question isn't what you can do. But what you will do. A siren echoed from above. The amplified hum intensified. Michael felt it in his bones, his chest, his mind. The storm had entered a phase that could not be ignored. He saw a feed of the van at the west gate. Crates lined, amplifiers glowing. The veterans approached, micro-gestures aligning with pulse. Every second stretched. Every heartbeat a moral pivot. Michael exhaled sharply. He understood finally, the tipping point was not a single event. It was a culmination of human will, technology, and moral choice. It was the intersection where hesitation became action. And action became irrevocable. The stranger's gaze bore into him. You can no longer watch. You can no longer wait. The moment to act is now. Or everything becomes a consequence beyond repair. The amplified hum surged again. Screens blinked. Nodes pulsed. The veterans moved with unstoppable force. And Michael realized. The storm had tipped. The line between observer and participant had vanished. He took a deep breath. Hands steadying over the keyboard. Because the world outside, and inside, was no longer waiting for permission. The storm had become self-aware. And Michael was its fulcrum. The basement was alive. Not with sound, exactly, though the hum of amplifiers and cascading monitors filled the air, but with awareness. Michael could feel it in every nerve, every synapse. The network wasn't just reacting. It was watching. It was learning. It was judging. He leaned closer to a bank of monitors, eyes scanning feeds across the capital. Veterans moved with precise coordination. Every micro-gesture, every glance, every footfall, amplified through his own abandoned technology, had become part of something far larger than he had imagined. You've seen systems like this before. Machines obeying commands, networks processing inputs. But this was different. This was intention made tangible. Human will, amplified, orchestrated into a force that blurred the line between agency and automation. The stranger's voice cut softly through the hum. What they called freedom, was quiet dependency. What they called control, was curated chaos. Michael froze. The words hit like a thunderclap. All this, the amplified human will, the movement of the veterans, the signals, the doors, the lights, was part of a system that had existed beneath the surface all along. A network designed not just to respond, but to shape reality according to invisible rules. To bend people, technology, and infrastructure into a single, unstoppable rhythm. He realized then why the amplifiers had been dormant for so long. Why the veterans had acted with precision and restraint. Why the first wave had been so quiet, so deliberate. Everything had been a test. A probing of boundaries. An experiment to see how far human intention could be pushed before the system revealed itself. A monitor flashed, focusing on the leader, Michael's former comrade, pausing in a hallway. The man's eyes scanned the environment, every subtle gesture influencing signal amplifiers, doors, cameras, security protocols. Michael's chest tightened. Recognition collided with moral reckoning. This was the man he had trusted. The man whose intentions he had assumed were aligned with humanity. And yet now, he was a node within a system he had never fully understood. The stranger leaned close. You see it now. Almost no one does. This is why control seems elusive. Because control isn't outside. It's embedded. Every decision, every pause, every moral compromise is already part of the network. And the network waits. Michael exhaled sharply. Every scenario he had imagined, every contingency he had planned, was now meaningless. The system had been awake all along. Responding to latent intentions, dormant signals, and hidden vulnerabilities. The amplified human will had become a mirror. Reflecting not just action, but morality, hesitation, courage, and fear. Outside, the storm continued. Veterans moved through corridors with uncanny precision. Every step, every gesture, amplified, mirrored, and propagated through the system. And yet, they were human, fragile, resolute, unpredictable. A paradox, human imperfection amplified into near perfection. Obedience made deliberate, chaos made intentional. Michael's hands shook. He realized he had been naive. The system wasn't just technology. It wasn't just a network of humans or machines. It was a reflection of everything humanity had left unresolved. A vessel for moral consequence, for accountability, for awakening. The stranger's voice softened. And here's the part almost no one saw. The network doesn't judge. It doesn't punish. It only reveals. It exposes every assumption, every oversight, every hidden fear. And amplifies it until it can no longer be ignored. Michael's mind raced. He saw the amplified signals, the flowing red nodes, the doors, the lights, the cameras, all interlinked. And he understood, the storm outside was not the real danger. The real danger was the system revealing what humanity had ignored within itself. A distant siren wailed. Lights flickered across the Capitol's corridors. Veterans adjusted their positions, microgestures amplified by the network. Michael felt the weight of moral responsibility crushing down. He could intervene. Override the signal. Try to impose order. But doing so would be like fighting a reflection of human will itself. The hum reached a low, resonant crescendo. It vibrated through concrete, steel, and bone. Through screens and signals. Through amplified intention. Through the fragile moral compass of those involved. Michael realized then the truth. The storm outside, the chaos, the amplified veterans. They were symptoms, not causes. The real revelation was that systems, human, technological, or combined, cannot be controlled. They can only be understood. And understanding requires courage. Requires reckoning. Requires acknowledging the consequences of both action and inaction. A monitor blinked red. The leader raised a hand. Signal amplified. Doors shifted. Lights blinked. The network pulsed. Michael's fingers hovered over the keyboard. He realized that he wasn't there to command the system. He was there to navigate it. To make choices within its flow. To influence outcomes while respecting the moral gravity embedded in every amplified signal. And in that moment, Michael understood the final paradox. The system didn't need him to act. It only needed him to see. To acknowledge what had been set in motion. To confront the truth amplified through every node, every gesture, every pulse. The storm outside raged. The network breathed. And Michael, finally awake, stood in the eye of a system that had exposed him. And all of humanity. In ways he could never have imagined. The hum had become unbearable. It wasn't just sound. It was pressure. It vibrated through concrete, steel, and bone. Michael could feel it in his chest, in his temples, in the small, almost imperceptible tremor of his fingers. The amplifiers, the networks, the veterans' movements, it all surged like a tidal wave. And he was at the center of it. Outside, the plaza had become a river of human energy. Flowing, surging, converging with purpose. Every step was amplified. Every gesture, micro or deliberate, reflected and magnified by the network. Cameras pivoted, doors shifted, lights blinked. The Capitol itself seemed alive, bending in response to their will. Michael leaned closer to the screens, sweat tracing lines down his temples. He saw his former comrade leading with the precision of someone who had become both human and instrument. A conductor of amplified chaos. Every micro-gesture, every pause, every glance, perfectly synchronized. Yet unmistakably human. Fragile, resolute, determined. He felt a crushing moral weight pressing into his chest. Every decision he had made, or failed to make, had converged here. Every hesitation, every silence, every overlooked possibility was now visible in stark, red-tinged clarity. The stranger stepped closer. "You feel it, don't you?" he asked, voice low, almost intimate. "The network, the storm, it doesn't just reflect reality. It reflects you. Your fears. Your doubts. Your failures. And right now, it's showing them all." Michael's pulse pounded. He realized the truth he had avoided for years. The storm wasn't merely external. It wasn't only veterans, amplifiers, or technology. It was every choice he had avoided, every responsibility he had deferred, every ethical compromise he had made. And now, it was undeniable. Inescapable. A siren blared somewhere distant. Lights flickered, cascading across marble walls. Signals pulsed in tandem with amplified human will. Every node on the network was active. Every micro-gesture amplified. Every step forward mirrored, magnified, unstoppable. Michael took a deep breath, feeling the full weight of the storm pressing in. He could intervene, override the signals, shut down amplifiers, attempt to regain control. But every choice carried consequences he could no longer calculate. Every action could ripple through the network, changing trajectories, lives, outcomes. Every hesitation could cost more than he was ready to bear. Outside, a veteran stepped forward, pausing at the threshold of a corridor. A single micro-gesture, the hand raised, the body shifted, the signal sent. And the amplifiers pulsed, doors clicked, cameras rotated. The network responded with mechanical precision, yet the intention behind it was human, fragile, and irrepressible. Michael realized, finally, that this was the breaking point. Not the moment of physical confrontation. Not the collapse of systems. But the point where human will, technology, morality, and consequence collided, and could no longer be separated. "You've been hiding behind hesitation," the stranger murmured. "But hesitation is a decision too. And at this point, every decision matters. Every choice. Every breath. Every heartbeat." Michael's hands clenched. He thought of the letter he had written, the quiet intentions he had buried, the principles he had abandoned. All of it had converged into a storm that could no longer be ignored. The amplifiers surged, pulsing in resonance with the veterans outside. The network wasn't just reacting. It was alive in a way he had never anticipated. Every human input, every micro-gesture, every ethical decision, every moment of hesitation, it all fed the system. It all echoed back amplified, magnified, unavoidable. He realized, in that suspended, excruciating moment. He wasn't controlling the system. He was the system. And if he failed to act, if he hesitated, the consequences would ripple outward, beyond control, beyond comprehension. Michael exhaled slowly, letting the weight settle. Inside him, a storm mirrored the chaos outside. The network pulsed. The amplified human will surged. And he made the choice. Not a perfect choice. Not a fully calculated one. But a conscious choice. An embrace of responsibility, however terrifying. He pressed a key. The hum shifted, responding. Nodes pulsed differently. Amplifiers adjusted subtly, mirroring his decision. Outside, the veterans paused. Their gestures hesitated, reflected, synchronized. A delicate balance emerged, human, technological, moral. Michael realized something profound. This wasn't about control. It wasn't about dominance. It was about navigation. About engaging the storm rather than fearing it. About acting with clarity amidst chaos. And acknowledging the weight of human consequence in every amplified signal. The stranger nodded once. "You've reached it. The breaking point. Where fear meets action, hesitation meets clarity, and chaos meets conscience." Michael's chest tightened. The storm outside still raged. The amplified network pulsed, alive and aware. But inside him, something had shifted. He was no longer merely a witness. He was participant, navigator, conscience. And for the first time, he understood the paradox. The storm could not be stopped. It could only be understood. And within that understanding, he could finally begin to act. The hum had softened. Not vanished, never vanished, but shifted. It was no longer a pulse of impending chaos. It was a vibration of consequence. Resonating through the capital, through the amplifiers, through every human gesture, every microdecision, every heartbeat. Michael leaned against the console, feeling exhaustion claw through him. But also something new, clarity. The amplified network, the veterans' movements, the chaos, it had exposed more than systems. It had exposed him. You felt this feeling. That sudden, almost painful awareness. That every choice you've ever made has echoes far beyond your perception. That inaction, hesitation, and silence are as consequential as action. And now, the echoes were undeniable. Screens blinked across the room, tracking human flow. Veterans paused mid-step, their microgestures rippling through the network. Michael watched carefully. He realized that every amplified gesture reflected intention. And that intention was rooted in human moral choices. Not in technology. The amplifiers, the systems, they only revealed what was already there. The stranger's voice, calm but firm, cut through the hum. The system doesn't decide morality. It doesn't judge good or evil. It only amplifies what exists. And what you're seeing now is the truth of intention, laid bare in amplified consequence. Michael exhaled slowly, letting the words settle. The first wave of veterans moved to a hallway. Microgestures aligned, amplified, but humanity shone through. Hesitation, doubt, courage, they were all visible. Every amplified movement was a story. Every pause was a moral choice. Every step forward a commitment. A siren wailed somewhere distant. Lights flickered. Doors clicked open and closed. Michael realized, the storm wasn't over. The network wasn't finished. But there was a pattern now, a rhythm that reflected more than chaos. It reflected responsibility. He thought of the letter he had written years ago. The abandonment of principles he had assumed were irrelevant. The decisions he had deferred in the name of convenience, of safety, of obedience. All of it, exposed. Amplified. Unavoidable. The stranger stepped closer. You see it, don't you? All the choices you avoided. All the hesitation you tolerated. They are no longer invisible. They echo through every node, every gesture, every amplified step. This is what accountability looks like. Michael's chest tightened. Every microgesture outside mirrored something within him. Every amplified step was a reflection of human will. Both his own and those around him. And he understood something profound. The storm wasn't merely chaos. It was an opportunity for clarity. Outside, the veterans moved with purpose, yet there was a subtle shift. Hesitation was no longer failure, it was reflection. Courage was no longer brute force, it was deliberate. Every action carried weight, amplified through the network. And yet every action remained human. Michael's hands hovered over the keyboard. He could intervene, redirect, shut down, manipulate, but he didn't. Not yet. Because he finally realized that true responsibility wasn't about control. It was about understanding, about engaging the storm with clarity. And navigating consequences with integrity. The stranger's voice softened, almost a whisper. The echoes of your choices are everywhere. They are in the amplified movements. In the decisions, in the hesitation. In the courage that emerges amidst chaos. And now, you begin to act with eyes wide open. Michael exhaled again. The hum pulsed gently, no longer a harbinger of imminent destruction, but a reminder of everything at stake. Outside, the veterans moved with amplified precision. But now there was a visible awareness in their actions. Every gesture was a dialogue. Every step was a reflection. Every amplified decision a mirror of human morality. He understood, finally, that the storm had not broken them. And it had not broken him. It had exposed truth. It had forced accountability. It had illuminated the intersection of human will, technology, and consequence. Michael pressed a key. The amplifiers shifted subtly, responding, not with control, but with reflection. The network pulsed. The veterans moved in measured, human rhythm. Chaos still existed, but now pattern and purpose intertwined with unpredictability. The stranger stepped back. You've seen it. You've felt it. The storm echoes what's within. And now, you have the choice to continue revealing truth, or retreat into silence. Which will it be? Michael looked at the pulsing screens. At the amplified human will. At the mirrored echoes of choice, courage, and fear. And he knew, this was only the beginning. The storm would continue. The network would continue. But for the first time, Michael was not just a witness. He was awake. He was responsible. He was human. The hum had settled into a steady rhythm. Not a silence never comes here, but a pulse. A heartbeat made mechanical, amplified, yet unmistakably human. Michael stood before the screens, the console warm beneath his fingers. Watching the veterans move with a strange combination of precision and hesitation. Every step outside, every gesture, every microdecision, was now a mirror reflecting more than action. It reflected intent. It reflected morality. It reflected human consequence magnified. You've seen it before. That moment when you realize your choices are no longer private. That every hesitation, every compromise, every act of courage echoes outward, amplified by forces you cannot fully control. The stranger leaned close, voice soft but intense. Do you see it, Michael? Not the chaos. Not the amplified signal. But the moral refracting through everything. Every movement, every hesitation, every decision, it bends light. It illuminates intention, fear, courage. Truths no one wanted to confront. Michael's chest tightened. He thought of the years he had avoided responsibility. The choices deferred, the principles buried. All of it had come to this. The amplified network, the veterans' movements. The storm in the capital. Were nothing more, or less, than reflections of human morality. Stretched to a force beyond comprehension. The screens blinked. A veteran paused mid-step, hesitation mirrored in the amplified signal. Another micro-gesture, a glance, a hand raised, shifted the network slightly. Michael understood, each ripple wasn't random. Each amplified decision was a reflection of intention, revealed. The stranger's words sank deep. You've been part of a system that doesn't dictate morality. That doesn't punish or reward. It simply amplifies what is already there. And now, you are seeing yourself. And everyone else with terrifying clarity. The question is not control. It is understanding. Michael exhaled, letting the weight of that sink in. The amplified human will outside, the veterans, the signals, the orchestrated chaos, was no longer a threat. It was a revelation. A mirror of humanity itself, flawed, courageous, fearful, resilient. The stranger gestured toward the monitors. Look closely. Every micro-gesture you see, every hesitation, every decisive act, is refracted through the system. And every refracted act carries consequences. Michael's eyes scanned a feed from the main hall. His former comrade paused at a junction. A micro-gesture, amplified, opened a corridor. Another, subtle, diverted a cluster of veterans. Every movement revealed intention, choice, consequence. The storm outside had become a moral prism, splitting human will into visible spectrums of truth, fear, and courage. A low vibration ran through the basement. It wasn't mechanical, it was emotional resonance, amplified and tangible. Michael felt it in his chest, in his lungs, in the small tremor of his hands. This was the echo of choices, the refracted consequences of human action magnified beyond anticipation. You feel it, don't you? The stranger's voice softened. This is the refracted storm. The collision of intention and consequence. The amplification of moral choices. It isn't about stopping chaos. It's about witnessing, understanding, and navigating it. Michael realized, finally, that the storm was a teacher. The network, the amplifiers, the veterans' movements, all were lessons in clarity, courage, and consequence. Every hesitation he had tolerated in life, every compromise, every silence, had been magnified and reflected. And now he had a choice. To retreat into guilt and fear. Or to act consciously, responsibly, morally. Outside, the veterans moved with precision tempered by reflection. No longer blindly amplifying the storm, they were aware. Each micro-gesture carried intention. Every step was an acknowledgement of consequence. And the network mirrored that human awareness. Michael pressed a key. The network responded, subtly, but not with control. With alignment. Not dominance, but resonance. Every amplified human action refracted through intention, morality, and consequence. The storm was no longer merely chaos. It had become a prism of human accountability. The stranger stepped back. You've seen it. You've felt it. The storm has refracted your choices, your intentions, your fear, your courage. And now, it's up to you to navigate the aftermath with eyes wide open. Michael exhaled slowly, letting the hum wash over him. The amplified network pulsed gently. The veterans moved in measured rhythm, hesitation intertwined with courage. The capital itself seemed to breathe, a reflection of amplified human morality. And in that quiet, resonant moment, Michael understood something profound. The storm had not broken humanity. It had revealed it. It had amplified its consequences. And through that revelation, through the refracted mirror of choice and consequence, humanity had a chance to act with awareness, clarity, and courage. The hum continued, steady, alive, reflective. And Michael, for the first time, felt aligned with it, not controlling, not fearing, but awake. He was a participant in the network of consequence. Aware of every ripple, every refracted choice, every moral echo. And in that understanding, he felt the first glimmer of hope. The hum had softened into something almost gentle. Not silence, never silence, but a rhythm, steady, purposeful, aware. Michael stood before the monitors, the glow painting his face. And for the first time, he felt the storm inside and outside converge. The amplified network, the veterans' movements, the intricate choreography of micro-gestures, had revealed something undeniable. Chaos is never random. Intention is never wasted. And every human choice, however small, resonates far beyond its origin. You've seen this feeling before. That moment when clarity pierces the storm. When fear, responsibility, and courage all meet. In one quiet, undeniable awareness. Michael exhaled slowly, letting the hum wash over him. Outside, the veterans moved with measured, deliberate rhythm. No longer raw chaos, no longer blind amplification. Every gesture was conscious. Every step was an acknowledgement of consequence. Every hesitation reflected awareness, every decisive act mirrored courage. The stranger's voice, soft but resonant, broke the quiet. You've reached the point where reflection meets action. Where consequences are visible, and choices carry weight. And now, Michael. The system is quiet. But it is watching. It remembers. It echoes. Michael's gaze lingered on a monitor, where a veteran paused at a junction. A micro-gesture, a subtle hand movement, adjusted the path of the group. The amplified signal pulsed gently in response. A dialogue between human intent and technological resonance. Michael realized the truth, the storm hadn't ended. It had evolved. It had become conscious reflection, not destruction. He thought back to the years of hesitation, of silence. To choices ignored, principles deferred. And the fear he had carried in every decision. All of it had converged here. Amplified into a force he could no longer deny. Revealing not only the storm outside, but the storm inside himself. You've seen what amplification truly means, the stranger continued. It's not control. It's consequence. Not dominance. It's reflection. And every human element. Fear, courage, hesitation, resolve. Resonates far beyond the moment it occurs. Michael's hands hovered over the console, yet he did not press. He understood now, the storm could not be forced, only engaged consciously. He was not a controller. Not a dictator of amplified will. He was a navigator, a witness, a participant. Aware of the echoes, accountable for his presence, deliberate in every decision. Outside, the veterans had paused. The amplified network mirrored that pause, a gentle, responsive rhythm. It was a moment of clarity within the chaos. A visible reflection of human consciousness amplified to its utmost edge. Michael saw courage, doubt, fear, determination. All refracted through the prism of amplified intention. The stranger placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. This is the resonance of choice. The echo of humanity made tangible. It's quiet now. But it will never forget. Every hesitation, every act of courage, every moral decision will echo through this system. And through every person it touches. Michael nodded slowly, feeling the weight lift slightly. Not as relief, but as understanding. The amplified human will was no longer a threat. It was a mirror, a teacher, a reflection of what humanity could and must confront. Chaos and consequence intertwined. Not as punishment, but as awareness. A low vibration passed through the basement. Lights flickered gently. Signals pulsed in rhythm with the veteran's movements. And in that quiet resonance, Michael finally understood. This was the moment where accountability met clarity. Where human will aligned with moral responsibility. Where intention became visible, tangible, amplified, but not destructive. He stepped back from the console, exhaling deeply. The storm outside continued. But it was no longer an enemy. It was a reflection. A dialogue. A lesson in the amplified consequences of every human act. The stranger's voice softened, almost a whisper. And maybe, this is where everything begins again. Where the echoes of choice can shape, not destroy. Where courage, hesitation, and reflection converge. Into something resilient. Human. Michael closed his eyes briefly, feeling the hum resonate through him. He felt alive, not in the sense of control. But in awareness. And for the first time, he knew, the storm had not broken him. It had awakened him. It had shown him everything he had deferred, ignored, and feared. And in that quiet, pulsing resonance, Michael understood something simple, yet profound. The storm doesn't end. It evolves. It teaches. It reflects. And humanity, flawed, fragile, courageous, must navigate it. The hum persisted, steady, alive. The amplified network pulsed gently. The veterans moved, deliberate, aware, human. And Michael, awake, accountable, aligned, watched it all. Knowing the echoes of every choice would ripple far beyond the present moment. The hum had settled into something almost sacred. It was no longer the pulse of fear, nor the sharp edge of amplified human will. It was awareness. A rhythm of consequence, reflection, and clarity. Every node, every signal, every amplified microgesture was a heartbeat in the vast, complex organism of human intention. Michael stood back from the console, breathing steadily, chest rising and falling with the resonance around him. Outside, the veterans moved deliberately. No longer rushing, no longer frantic, no longer merely reacting. Every step was a choice. Every microgesture a declaration. Every amplified movement a mirror of conscience. He had thought the storm was outside. But now he knew the storm had always been within. It had been in the hesitation. The fear, the compromises, the quiet avoidance of responsibility. It had been amplified, yes, but never created. It had only revealed what was already present. The full spectrum of human morality, courage, and consequence. You felt this feeling before. That moment when chaos has passed. But the weight of what remains is heavier than before. Not destructive. Not punishing. But truthful. Every decision, every inaction, every act of courage echoes far beyond its origin. The stranger stepped beside him. You see it now, don't you? The network, the storm, the amplified will. It doesn't exist to dominate. Nor to destroy. It exists to reflect. To show consequences. To illuminate intention. And in that reflection, you are free to act consciously. Michael nodded slowly. He had spent years hiding behind inaction. Deferring responsibility. Avoiding the moral weight of choice. But now, the storm had lifted, not vanished. But transformed into a mirror. And he could finally see clearly. Outside, the veterans moved as if in quiet ritual. Their amplified gestures no longer chaotic, no longer reactive. But deliberate. Measured. Human. They were aware of consequences, aware of themselves, aware of the network. And yet unmistakably themselves, flawed, courageous, determined. Michael took a step toward the console. Not to control, not to dominate, not to manipulate. But to align with the resonance of choice. To navigate. To participate. To acknowledge the weight of every ripple, every amplified decision, every moral echo. The stranger's voice softened, almost reverent. Freedom isn't inherited. It's practiced. Courage isn't born, it's chosen. And accountability is a dialogue between intention and consequence. You've seen the storm. You've felt it. Now, what will you choose to become? Michael exhaled slowly. The hum vibrated through the concrete, through the amplifiers, through his own chest. Every pulse was a reminder that the storm was alive. That human will was alive. That consequence was unavoidable, and morality unavoidable in its reflection. Outside, the sun began to rise. Its light filtered through the Capitol's windows, casting long shadows across marble floors, polished corridors, and resilient faces. The amplified human will had not vanished. It had matured. It had reflected. It had revealed. And the veterans, and Michael, moved within it. With awareness, with responsibility, with courage. The stranger's voice lingered in his mind. And maybe, this is where everything begins again. Not with chaos. Not with fear. But with reflection. With amplified awareness. With human will aligned to morality, courage, and consequence. Michael stepped back from the console entirely. Letting the hum resonate through him one last time. The amplified signals pulsed gently. No longer urgent, no longer chaotic. But alive in a new way, awake, aware, accountable. The storm had revealed everything. The fragility of inaction. The weight of hesitation. The courage hidden in micro-gestures. And the power of intention amplified beyond imagination. And in that quiet, reflective resonance, Michael finally understood. The storm does not end. It does not forgive. It does not forget. But it teaches. It illuminates. It awakens. And humanity, if willing to confront itself, to engage consciously, to act morally, can navigate its echoes, can learn from its amplification, and can begin again. The hum pulsed once more, gently, steadily. And Michael felt the truth deep in his chest. He was awake. He was aware. He was responsible. And perhaps, just perhaps, the beginning had truly arrived. The lights flickered one final time. A door clicked shut gently. The amplified human will continue its rhythm. But now, it was alive, reflective, and human. The camera of the mind pulls back. The capital, the amplified network, the veterans, Michael. All exist within a resonance of choice, courage, and consequence. The storm has become a mirror. The echo has become clarity. And the story continues, in every decision, every gesture, every heartbeat yet to come.